and welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel. In this video, I will show you how to make this super cute fringed eyelet scarf. This is a great beginner pattern for those of you ready to venture beyond the garter stitch scarf. The link to the free pattern and all the materials can be found in the video description box right down there below. And while you're down there, smash that like button, as my kids say. While we're here, let's go ahead and take a look at what you need to make this wonderful scarf. As I mentioned, this is a free pattern. You will download your pattern and it will look like this. Along with the pattern, you will need 5 balls of Red Heart's Evermore yarn. Along with the Evermore yarn, you need a pair of size 13 knitting needles. I will be using circular needles, but you can absolutely use straights for this if you choose. Along with the knitting needles, you will need a bent tip tapestry yarn needle to weave in your ends. You could also use a crochet hook, so that way it makes it easier to add your fringe. Go ahead and download your free pattern, gather your materials, and let me show you everything you need to know in order to complete this really great scarf. To begin this scarf, you need to cast on 29 stitches, and the width of the scarf is about 11 inches wide. So I want to take my length of yarn and measure out 3 times 11, and then give myself a little bit extra. This will ensure that when I do the long tail cast on, I won't run out of yarn. At the point where I have measured off, I will place a slip knot. If you need detailed instructions for how to do the slip knot or for the long tail cast on, please check out the beginner knitting videos right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Once you get your slip knot, go ahead and place it directly onto your needle and jump in to the long tail cast on. You need to cast on a total of 29 stitches. These 29 stitches account for 2 stitch pattern repeats and 2 garter stitches on either side of the scarf. What the garter stitch edge does is make sure that your scarf will not roll in on itself because of the stockinette portion of the scarf. Once you get 29 stitches on your needles, you should be left with a little bit of tail. Just leave that tail hanging out for now and ignore it. You will then go ahead and knit 2 rows. So you will turn your work and you will begin to simply knit 2 rows. Now I'm going to show you how to knit into this yarn because this yarn is a roving type yarn. So you want to make sure that you are going into the full stitch before you knit it. Do not split the yarn in half because then that could accidentally make you increase your stitches. So just be very careful as you're working along, making sure you go directly into the stitch as it's on the needle and knit all the way across. As you can see, I am knitting with the yarn in my right hand, which is called English method. If you want to give it a try, you could also try the continental method, which is exactly the same motion, but you will put the yarn in your left hand and go into the stitches just like normal, but then wrap your yarn with your left hand and come out and off. This is a very comfortable knitting method for those of you who are right-handed crocheters. It becomes very natural because this is the way you also hold your yarn when you crochet. I will go ahead and knit these 2 rows so that way we can jump in to the pattern section of the scarf. Once you've knit 2 rows, your work looks a little something like this. You have some simple garter stitch going on the bottom. Again, this makes it so that way your scarf won't roll. Once we've done this, it's time to jump into the actual pattern. So we will begin with row 1. And again, I'm going to move my yarn back to my right hand. And it says here that we are on the wrong side of our fabric. So we will go ahead and we will begin with a knit 2. Knit 1, knit 2. Now, the entire scarf is made with the beginning of knit 2 and it ends with knit 2. So if you choose, you could absolutely grab a stitch marker at this point and add it to your work, just so that you can remember that these first 2 stitches are knit. You could also add a stitch marker to the end, right before the last 2 stitches, so that you remember those last 2 stitches are knit. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. So I've knit 2 stitches and now I'm supposed to purl. So I want to make sure I bring my yarn between my needles, come forward, and I will purl 5 stitches. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I'm beginning to build my stockinette portion over these 5 stitches. Once I've done that, I then will move my yarn back to the back and I will knit 5. So I will knit 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I need to purl my next 5, so I move my yarn to the front, and this time I will purl with the yarn in my left hand, so that way you can see how that works. I hold my yarn to the front, I go in just like I normally would, and I wrap the yarn with my left hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is repeated, so I put my yarn to the back and I knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I go ahead and move my yarn to the front and I purl 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm to my last 2 stitches. Remember, I told you that these 2 stitches remain in garter stitch. So let's go ahead and add another one of my fun stitch markers here. And that reminds me that these last 2 stitches are always going to be knit. It's just a visual reminder, and you don't have to add that. It's simply something that I like to add just to remind myself that those first 2 and last 2 stitches are knit. You will then turn your work and you're ready to begin row 2. Now row 2 has you knit 7. So let's go ahead and we'll knit our first 2 stitches. So knit 1, knit 2, slip our marker, and then we'll knit the next 5. 3, 4, 5. Once we do that knit 7, we jump into our pattern repeat, which is purl 5, knit 5. So let's go ahead. We will purl 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll knit 5. So I move my yarn back to the back. Let's go ahead and switch hands again. Once again, this is not changing anything to do with my knitting other than I'm holding it in a different hand. So I'm still knitting exactly the same. I'm just holding the yarn in a different hand. Now I have to purl 5, so I bring my yarn forward and I purl 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Move my yarn back to the back. I knit 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm to my marker. I simply just slip it over and I go ahead and I will knit my last 2. It's the end of row 2. Row 3 is a repeat of row 1. So let me go ahead and do that and join me back here for row 4. By the time you finish row 3, your work begins to look a little something like this and almost resembles the start of what would be called a basket weave. Let's go ahead and begin row 4, which has us introduce the simple eyelet lace pattern. Now when you're doing lace, you couple a decrease with an increase, so that way your stitch count doesn't change along the whole row. For this particular pattern, we are going to be working with full fashion shaping, meaning we will be doing knit 2 togethers, so that way our stitches lean towards the right, and we will be doing SSKs or slip knits to make those stitches lean towards the left. It's going to give a really subtle sort of shaping to the lace eyelet portion of the scarf, but it's something really great to learn, and there are 2 new decreases that might be added to your knitter's toolbox, and it's fun and easy to do. Let me show you. Let's start with row 4. For row 4, we begin with our knit 2, just like we've done before. And we know that because our stitch marker is hanging out there, right? So I'll do my knit 2 and I'll slip my marker. Now it's time to knit 2 together. So this will be my decrease. So here are my 2 stitches. I will simply take my needle, go into the second stitch first, and then go into the first one. See how I'm through 2 stitches, and I will knit them together just as the word sounds. So what was 2 has now become 1. Since I've done the knit 2 together, I now have to work my increase so my stitch count doesn't change. So I will do a yarn over. For a yarn over, my yarn is in back. I bring it up between my needles, bring it up over top of my right hand needle, and then back to the back. That little string right there as it lays on my needle, that is my yarn over. That's as easy as it gets. You can put your finger or your thumb right there to hold that in place. I find it really easy as you go to work your next stitch. So the next stitch on row 4 is actually a knit 1. So I simply will knit 1 stitch. And this is what it should look like on your needle. So you have a knit 1, you have this string that looks like it's just resting on your needle, and you have your knit 2 together. That's perfect. That's what we want. Once we've done our knit 1, we need to do another yarn over. So we will put our yarn, it's in back, bring it forward, bring it up over top of our right hand needle and back to the back. So now we've done another yarn over. I'm going to hold that stitch, and now we will do what's called an SSK. An SSK is another decrease, and it's called a slip slip knit. What a slip slip knit does is it leans to the left where the knit 2 together leans to the right. So we've just completed our yarn over, and what we want to do now is we want to go into the first stitch as if to knit and slip it off. Go into the next stitch as if to knit and slip it off. Now I'll take my left hand needle, I will go into the front leg of those 2 stitches I just slipped. See how this looks like I'm just knitting those through the back leg? That's what we want. And then you simply will knit those together through that position. Does that make sense? Perfect. So once we've done the SSK, we begin our repeat, which is purl 5. So we purl 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we jump back into our lace. So we will do our knit 2 together, and this is going to lean towards the right. See how that stitch looks like it leans towards the right? Then we do our yarn over, which is our yarn is in back, bring it up between our needles, and then let it go up and over top of our right hand needle. Hold that in place, knit 1, yarn over again, so between my needles, up over top and over, and then we will do our SSK. We slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, take our left hand needle, stick it into the front leg of those 2 stitches, yarn over and knit those 2 stitches together. See how that resulting stitch looks like it leans towards the left? That's what we want. That's what our stitches are going to do. Once you finish with the SSK, you go ahead and work the repeat one more time. So you would purl 5 and then do the eyelet pattern once again. So I am purling 5, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then this time, let's hold my yarn in the opposite hand. So those of you who are interested in that can see how this is done. And we're doing the eyelet pattern one more time. So we work our knit 2 together. We yarn over, so our yarn is in back. Bring it between our needles, up over top our right hand needle. And I hold that in place. I knit 1. I'm going to yarn over again. My yarn is in back. Bring it between my needles, over top of my needle, and I SSK. So I slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, take my left hand needle, stick it into the front leg of those 2 stitches I just slipped, yarn over my needle, out and off, and I've completed the SSK. To the end of my row, so I slip my marker and I simply knit my last 2 stitches. Pretty easy, huh? Pretty cool. So far so good, right? You've learned an awful lot in only 4 rows, and all you need to do now is follow the instructions to complete the scarf. If you do rows 5, 6, and 7, there's just a repeat of rows 1 and 2. On row 8, you are going to do the eyelet pattern again, only this time, instead of beginning with the knit 2 together, you'll begin with the SSK. They just switch places. So you already know how to do the stitches. As long as you follow the instructions, you'll have no problem. But because this is a video and I'm here to help you because that's what I love to do, I'm going to get my stitch pattern right here to row 8 so that way I can walk you through the row 8 instructions. Remember, as you're working along on row 5, you will treat those yarn overs just as if they're normal stitches. So you will purl them as normal. I know it looks funny, but trust me, it will come out just perfect. If you're unsure about your stitch count, at the end of row 5, be sure to count your stitches. You should still only have 29 on your needle. I'm ready to begin row 8. Let's go ahead and jump in. We start off row 8 with a knit 2, just like normal. And I know that because I told you, and I know that because my marker's right there. I love when I have a marker there. So for row 8, we begin with an SSK. So we slip one as if to knit, slip one as if to knit, put your left hand needle in the front leg of both of those stitches, and then knit them together. You then will yarn over, so between your needles, bring your yarn back over top of your right hand needle, go ahead and knit one. We'll yarn over again, so between our needles, up over top of our right hand needle, and again, I like to hold that stitch right there. And on this side, we will do our knit 2 together. When we're done here, what you can see is the resulting stitch from the knit 2 together looks like it's leaning towards the right, and the stitch from the SSK looks like it's leaning towards the left. It just is one of those subtle little decrease differences that makes your fabric a little bit more fascinating. Once you've completed that lace bit portion, it's time to go into your repeat. So again, we do a purl 5. So let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I want to point out that it's okay that your yarn looks like it might be not raveled, because it really is so loosely spun. It's a roving type yarn that's perfectly normal and natural. Bring your yarn back to the back because we're getting ready to do our repeat again, which is an SSK. So we slip one as if to knit, slip one as if to knit, put your left hand needle on the front leg of both of those stitches, and then knit them together. We will yarn over, knit one, make sure that yarn over remains there, okay? You want to make sure that's there. Yarn over again, and then we'll do our knit 2 together. And that would be the end of that repeat. So let's repeat again. So I'm going to switch the yarn into my opposite hand. This is my more comfortable, dominant, preferred way because I am a crocheter also, as many of you know. So I will go ahead and purl my 5. And then do an SSK. Slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, left hand needle in front leg of those 2 stitches, and then knit them together. Yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, and then knit 2 together. Slip my marker and knit the last 2 stitches. At the end of this row, this is what my work looks like. You begin to see the little eyelet portions right there. Pretty cool, right? That's all you really need to know in order to complete this pattern. As long as you follow the instructions, what you will notice is that on rows 14 and 18, the eyelet pattern shifts over a block. So that way they aren't stacked right on top of each other. So as we look down here, in the areas right here where we don't have any stitches as far as the eyelets, our eyelets will then be placed in these sections versus these sections. So it does get switched up a little bit. As long as you follow the instructions, you'll have no problem completing these stitches, especially now that you've worked through them once. The only other thing you really need to know regarding this pattern is how to bind off and how to add fringe. So let me show you how to do the bind off, and then I will show you how to do some really simple fringe. Obviously, I'm using a different yarn here to show you how to bind off, and that's only so that way I can continue on with my scarf without having to bind off stitches for you. To bind off stitches for this pattern, all you need to do is knit 2 stitches just like normal. So you will knit 2 stitches. Then what we want to have happen is we want to have the first stitch you knit, or the stitch that's the second one back from the tip of your needle, jump up and over that front stitch. And you will do that simply by using your left hand needle, going into the stitch, and having it jump up and over that front stitch and off, and then take your left hand needle out. You're left with 1 remaining stitch. So you will go into the next stitch on your left hand needle and knit it. Now you're back to 2 stitches. So you have the back stitch, jump up and over the front stitch and off. Knit 1 more stitch, because you always want to get back to 2 stitches on your right hand needle. Have the back stitch, jump up and over and off. You would do this all the way down to the end of your scarf. At the end, all you need to do is cut your yarn. So let's say I'm at the end here. Let's just pretend. All I want to do here is cut my yarn, leaving at least 4 to 6 inches. That way you can weave in your tail. And look at how easy this is. You simply just pull up on that loop. Okay, so this is the final loop I did. I'm just pulling up on it. My yarn is splitting on me, of course, because I'm doing a video, and that's what happens, Murphy's Law, right? And you just give that a nice tug, and that seals off your final bind off. Once you've bound off, all you need to do now is create some fringe, and that's really easy to do. All you need to do is grab the yarn that you used on your scarf. Again, this is not my yarn that I used on the scarf, but you can see what I'm talking about. You will cut 2 strands of yarn about 10 inches long. So let's assume that's 10 inches long. And let's say there we go. And so we will just cut that. That will be our example. Okay, and let's cut it down here also. Once you've done that, you fold these 2 strands in half. And you would take your work, so you would take your scarf, and this is where the crochet hook would come in handy if you want to use a crochet hook. And you would stick the crochet hook in the edge of your scarf, okay, going along the edge. Grab the middle section of the fringe. So we grab that middle section of the fringe, and you pull it through the scarf, okay? So I simply pull that through my scarf. Once I've pulled that through, all I need to do is open up that loop section, grab the tail of the fringe, and then pull that through. Once I've done that and I give that a good pull, it makes the fringe line up really great. Now you'll notice that the loop portion is exposed on the right side, which means your crochet hook needs to go in through the wrong side first. So you go in through the wrong side, pull that through, and then once you take the tails and loop them through the edge of your tassels or your fringe, give it a nice pull, you get some great fringe. Super easy. It's great to add fringe to a lot of different items. So if you don't want to add fringe to this scarf, at least you know how to do it for some of your other fun items. Now you know how to make the fringed eyelet scarf using the brand new yarn, I took my tag off, Evermore by Red Heart. It comes in some really great colors. It's a lot of fun to work with, and it uses big needles, so you get done really quickly. As I mentioned before, this is a great beginner project if you have only ever done garter stitch before. Let this be a little bit more of an adventure for you and create something really fun and funky for this fall and winter season. Thank you for joining me here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Make sure that you give this video a thumbs up and hit subscribe so you're up to date whenever there's a new video released. And I hope to see you back here again soon. Thank you so much. Bye. Hey, don't leave yet. I'm sure there are other videos here that you will enjoy. Go ahead and check out some of my knitting and crochet videos as well as some of my crafting videos. You will love them, I promise. If you hit subscribe, you'll be up to date whenever there's a new video released. And as my kids say, don't forget to smash that like button. Bye!